Alrighty, so it is 6 o'clock on Monday, December 21st, 2020, and I'll call the meeting to order. And as per usual, we're here live on YouTube because of COVID-19, and we're starting a little bit earlier because this is our last meeting of the year, and we have a lot of items on the agenda. So many that I don't want to share with you the guess of what time I think the meeting will be over with. I was just looking at our website online. I was just trying to add up how many council meetings we've had this year. It seems like we've had a lot more than normal, and that's due to COVID and planning meetings and everything else. But I just wanted to just give a shout out to council and staff for all the meetings that they've put in this year, and thank them for all their hard work, and council for joining us. And sometimes when it's a late notice, whether it's a 24 hours notice beforehand for an emergency meeting or whatever it is, everybody's been able to join us. Speaking of people joining us, you will note that Councillor Clark is not here right now. She has a prior commitment, but she will be here at 7 o'clock. So is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Deputy Mayor Hendricks?
Yes, I have a indirect conflict with the planning. Just a minute, I'll get here. The official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Sydenham Ridge.
All right. Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Hendricks. Is there anything else?
Councillor Clark has declared a conflict. I've received it in writing, but she won't be at the meeting till closer to 7. Her conflicts in regards to minor variance A07-2020.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Yep.
Alrighty, so with that, we do have a number of delegations and timed events. So we're hopefully going to keep things on track, but the first thing on the agenda there is the minutes of the previous meeting, which is December 7th, 2020. If we have a mover and seconder for those.
So moved.
Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Brody. All those in favor? And that is carried. So the delegation, so at 6:05, we have Chris Trainey here from the County of Middlesex, the county engineer, to talk about the Kerwood Park improvements. Then at 6:20, we have Jennifer Buchanan from Grand Scott Ends for our 2019 audit. And then followed by that at 7 o'clock, we have a number of planning applications, as well as our quarter revision for the nip ball drain. So there's going to be a lot of faces joining us and leaving us throughout the meeting. So before we jump into Mr. Trainey's report there, I'll jump into the correspondence just because then we don't forget about those. So the upcoming conferences, seminars, and meetings. So our next regular meeting is Monday, January 11th, 2021. And then the Roma conference is from January 25th to 26th. And then our next regular meetings are February 1st and February 16th. And I'll just remind council that we have a CAO selection closed council meeting, which is scheduled for 7 o'clock on Wednesday of this week. So our recommended readings, item number 1 is from the Asaba Bayfield Conservation Authority, and it is the December 17th agenda for the Board of Directors, the GM report for the same date, December 17th, and then the minutes of their previous meeting, November 19th. Going into the action required, item number 2 is from Carlton Place's resolution regarding COVID-19 and childcare funding. Deputy Mayor Hendricks.
Yeah, I had support for that, especially given the situation Ontario's going to be in for the next month. I think it is a big deal about who's looking after kids and where they're going.
Okay, so that's moved by Deputy Mayor Hendricks, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Is there any discussion on this one? All those in favor? And that one's carried. And then item number 3, and it's from Municipality of Southwest Middlesex, and it's a resolution regarding the CN drainage. Councillor McKinnon?
I'm in favor of supporting.
Okay, so
I'll move to support.
And do we have a seconder for that one? Okay, Councillor Brody. It's like everybody's hand went up. So all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, now that that's out of the way, it's right on 6:05. So we'll go back to our delegation for the Kerwood Park improvements. And we have Chris Trainey here. And I see you're dressed for our Adelaide Metcalfe meeting. I don't see your tie like you normally do at the county meetings.
No tie today, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for that. Celebrating a big birthday here. So I'm happy to come before you today with a report on the Kerwood Park rehabilitation, just trying to move this project forward. And specifically, the timing of this report is to coincide with the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream, which should qualify for the rehabilitation or the replacement of the main structure in Kerwood Park. So I know that this has been a discussion around this council table for a while now, and there has been some preliminary work conducted by Spreetz Consulting to look at the whole park. So this would be the replacement of or rejuvenation of the baseball diamonds, paving of the parking lot, replacement of the electrical infrastructure, and the construction of a new main park building, including washroom facilities, and a maintenance storage area for whatever maintenance equipment we would want to have on hand. And the total budget at this point is about $737,000. Now that includes the engineering fees, but does not include HST. I would say that the project, there is still design yet to be done on this project, so that total number may change up or down, hopefully in a downward direction. So the primary component of this phase of the work that I'm recommending be applied for through this COVID funding is for the demolition of the pavilion and construction of the new facility, including the men's, women's, and family washrooms, the storage area for park maintenance and other park-related equipment, and then a new mechanical room. As everyone knows, the electrical and mechanical that's on site right now is well past its prime and needs to be replaced in order to support the new lighting for the baseball diamonds and lighting for the park in general. So the building is designed to meet AODA standards, so it is a barrier-free building. All three washrooms are barrier-free. It's also been designed to be somewhat of a modular building in that it can be added onto in the future. So if there's a future demand or need for an expanded facility, if we want to attach a pavilion to this facility, there's the ability to do that. This is a type of construction that's being recommended. It's the design that Spreetz has included, and the total cost for basically the demolition, the construction of the new building, and creation of a temporary access is estimated at $414,370 plus HST. And it's likely that the only part of the project that would qualify for the funding is actually the building itself, and that's about $364,000. Thanks for that, Morgan or Gregor, who put that up there. That's about $364,800, in which we could get $100,000 is the cap that we have in Adelaide Metcalfe for funding this facility. So you can see it here, and you can see the layout of this building, and this is sort of the way this building is constructed, that either end could be expanded in the future. And this is basically the footprint of the building that's designed to this point. So the location of the building, the rotation of the building will all be determined. That hasn't been put on a formal plan as of yet, but this is where the stage we're at with Spreetz, and they're moving forward with the design, getting the documents ready so that we can stay on track for a spring, early 2021 tender for the actual construction of this project. And my recommendation really is to stage this project over 2 seasons, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One primary one is, in my opinion, when we see these types of funding programs come out, it's very likely we'll see another funding program follow this first one. So there will be ample opportunity, I think, in the future into 2021 and 2022 to really take advantage of future funding programs through the federal and provincial government. I think they will be there. I think there is always a great intent to do funding through infrastructure and funding for community type facilities, and this is a perfect one. And I think it absolutely fits in with what they want to do, increasing people getting outside, using recreational facilities, and being able to, be out there and be active and be healthy. The other advantage of going over 2 seasons for this is really, if you wanted to do it all as one big large project in 2021, the park would be basically neutralized. You really wouldn't be able to do anything in that park all summer because it would be completely torn up. The way we've envisioned this at this point with a consultant is we really would kind of cordon off sort of that front area, if you're familiar, up closer to Kerwood Road, and kind of contain the demolition and construction of the building, the running of the new electrical into the property, and doing all that work. But the diamonds could stay open, the rest of the park could stay open, and it would be well contained. And then getting into the following year and doing the baseball diamonds, doing some of the landscaping work and the other parts of the project, which cause a massive disruption to the use of the park, at least you'll have that front piece done. And then we can get on the baseball diamonds and do those in the following year. Run the lighting, because you're going to have to excavate, pull the lighting out, put the new posts up, the poles, everything else. You really wouldn't be able to use those. And really, on my investigation of the site, and I've spoken to Coulter about this, there's some minor repairs that we can do to some of the facilities, I think, to get another year of life out of those baseball diamonds. And then we can do a wholesale change of those in 2022 and hopefully find some funding for that. So again, the recommendation is there, and I will, if Morgan wants to chime in a bit, there was urgency to get this funding in and applied for. This meeting is past the deadline, so the funding has been applied for at this point in time. It's not written in stone that we have to develop what is shown in front of you here in this report, but we're looking for $100,000 in funding to rejuvenate that building, so to get a new building built on that site in 2021. I think it's highly likely this application will be successful. But again, we're very early here in the process. There's lots of time here between now and early spring next year to get you a solid plan, so you'll know exactly what's going to be built, the orientation of it, where it is on that site. And unfortunately, Spritz just could not get that information to us in time for today's meeting or in time for that application. But I think it was critical we get in front of the $100,000, I think, which is a big chunk. That's about a third of the cost of that building. And again, happy to answer any questions. My recommendations are a 2-year stage to this. I think that's key. Those are the 2 key things. We got the application for the building for the $100,000. The other key thing is kind of getting on board with doing this over 2 seasons. If the intent of council is to do it in 2021, that really changes the scope of what Spritz has to do now to get the tender out the door early enough for us to get the work done next year. Certainly could tender the building early 2021, work on the engineering for the rest of the park, get that tendered out in the fall of 2021 and be ready to go first of spring 2022, get in there and get that work completed. Maybe have a bit of a late baseball season in 2022 if we do it that way. I'll stop there, Mr. Mayor, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I see Deputy Mayor Hendricks hand one up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the 2-phase is definitely the way to go. The Optimists have an annual tournament, which is their main fundraiser, and they generally do it the second week of June. So I think if that's a big deal in this township. So I think if it's not going to be usable for that kind of a function by the second week of June, the first thing we should do is let the Optimists know so that they can move their tournament back a few weeks or whatever. That's my only comment. Other than that, I'm glad we're finally getting to this.
Yeah. All right, Councillor Brody.
Yeah, again, like Marianne said, I'm glad that this is finally moving forward. We talked about this for a long time. The only thing I didn't like here is just the building design isn't what I think we wanted or requested. So I do think that needs a little, because we ripped down the one pavilion, we do need a little bit of a pavilion off the building, and so hopefully that's what Spritz can get tidied up a little better for us,
Through the mayor to Councillor Brody, that's the intent with this design, is so we can get to talk about, putting an extension of a, sort of a covered area, sort of over the doors to the bathroom, if you can imagine that orientation.
Mhm.
That's the intent, to see it, if we can do it that way, so people have a little bit of a space, a little bit of a respite from the inclement weather if we do get rain or something like that. And just to also respond to Councillor Hendricks, I think it would be key to know that the building is likely not going to be functional by the beginning of June. So if we want to communicate to the optimists, if they want to have use of that facility, I would likely say August timeframe is probably a better time for them to think about organizing the tournament. I mean, COVID likely will have some impact on that June timeframe anyways. But I would highly be unlikely for us, even if we were out to tender in March, to get in there at the start of the construction season and have that new building up and functional. And the beginning of June would be very tight.
Thanks. Councillor McKinnon, do you have any questions or comments at all?
No, I think it's all been covered, and I agree with the two-phase. And I'm prepared to make a motion for the recommendation as provided by Chris Trainey.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hendricks. Any further discussion at all? I'll just also echo the comments that council members have already said, where I think council and all of the public will be excited to get this project underway. We've been talking about this for years, and it's going to be exciting to get this shovels in the ground and get this going, because it's been needed, and we've been talking about public washrooms at the Kerwood Park. I think we're all looking forward to getting rid of that the porta potty that's been here for a number of years that we've been using. So this is exciting news. Alrighty. So with that, all those in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. Right. So do we need anything else from Chris? No, I think that's it. Okay, thank you so much, Chris, and happy birthday to your wife.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Have a safe holidays,
too.
and we'll see you in 2021.
Okay.
You too, Chris.
Alrighty, so we are almost at that time for our auditor's report. I just have one motion to go back to, and that's the motion to just receive and file correspondence item CC1. We have a mover and seconder for that. That was the Sauble Bayfield conservation stuff. So I think I saw Deputy Mayor Hendricks and Councillor McKinnon. All those in favor? And that's carried. And we're not going to sit around for 2 minutes. So if our clerk's okay with it, we're going to jump right into the auditor's report for the 2019 financial statements. And we have Jennifer Buchanan here. And I'll hand it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor Smith. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Buchanan. I think most of you will recall I've been physically attending the council meetings for the last few years. This is my first year as the engagement partner for the year-end audit. And I've been working in conjunction with Rob Foster, who was the previous engagement partner, and he's stuck around in a quality review role. So we do most of our municipal audits that way, where we work together. So I will be going through the draft statements for December 31st, 2019. Would you prefer if I share my screen, or do you all have copies in front of you and you'd prefer to just look at the tiles and I'll just talk to them? Is there a preference here?
It helps when you unmute yourself. So I would say if you want, you can if you can share the screen, or Morgan, whoever does that. We are live on YouTube, just so you know. So people are watching from home, so I think it's easier for them also to follow along with the document.
Right. I'm okay to share my screen then. I'm just going to share the statements. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see the statements okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so I am reviewing the draft statements for the year ended December 31st, 2019. On Obviously, that's almost a year ago at this point, and you are all well aware of some of the events that have happened in 2020 leading to that, and we'll get into that a little bit further as well. So we're going to walk through the financial statements. And so I am on page 1, which is a new letter. It's management's responsibility for financial reporting. So this is a new requirement. It doesn't mean the responsibility has changed. There's always been a responsibility for management to provide the auditors with accurate information. But this is a new way of illustrating that to anyone who may pick up this set of financial statements. And it's basically saying that the financial statements are the responsibility of management. They've been prepared in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for public sector entities. Those are the different statements that are included. All the information that's been provided to us is accurate as far as management knows. And then assuming everything goes okay, it would be your acting treasurer who would sign this letter. Again, the responsibility is no different. It's very similar to the management representation letter that we ask management to sign on an annual basis. Again, indicating that the information provided to the auditors is accurate. This is just something that's included in the financial statements now. Continuing to page 2, we have the independent auditors report. I'm just going to zoom out a bit so I can read to you the opinion. So we have audited the financial statements of the corporation of the Township of Adelaide Metcalfe, which comprise the statement of financial position as at December 31st, 2019, and the statement of operations and accumulated surplus, statement of change in net financial assets, and statement of cash flows for the year then ended, and notes to the financial statements, including a summary of significant accounting policies. In our opinion, the municipality's financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the municipality as at December 31st, 2019, and the results of its operations and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for public sector entities. So that is a clean audit opinion that the financial statements are not materially misstated based on the audit performed, and that they have been prepared in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for public sector entities. Assuming that the statements are approved tonight, the reporting date would become December 21st, 2020. Turning to the statement of financial position, this is where we can see the assets and liabilities of the municipality or of the township at a point in time. So this is as at December 31st, 2019. I'm going to comment on a few of the year-over-year variances, but then I'll, of course, pause for any questions. So the first line under financial assets is cash. You can see there's a significant increase in cash year over year, and that does directly correlate with the the surplus for the year. So you'll see when we get to statement of operations that there was a significant surplus for the year, which is leading to that large cash balance. There has been a large cash balance at the township since about 2015, where there's been a majority has been held in cash and a much smaller amount held in investments. In terms of investments, there's a little bit of change there relating to interest earned on the investments year over year and reinvested. Taxes receivable and accounts receivable, we can see further details on those in notes 3 and 4. Taxes receivables relatively comparable year over year. There was an increase in the current year receivable, as well as an increase in the penalties and interest. So that's what was sitting in taxes receivable at December 31st, 2019. Accounts receivable, you can see there was a decrease over 2018. The most significant part of that was there was a large HST receivable amount sitting in the 2018 balance, and there was less HST receivable due to being the timing of the filings in 2019. So that brings us to total financial assets at December 31st of $7.6 million in 2019 compared to $6.2 million in 2018. Under financial liabilities, we have accounts payable and accrued liabilities. In the prior year, so in 2018, within that $533,000, there was a significant portion relating to capital, and there was no similar recurrence in 2019. leading to that difference in the balance. Deferred revenue, we'll see some further details on in note 5. The main reason for the increase is the gas tax funding that was received in 2019 was not spent before the end of the year, so it's sitting as deferred revenue available for future use. Net long-term liabilities would be the debt of the township, and that has decreased in line with debt payments that have been made. Landfill closure and post-closure liability, a very small increase, and that's in line with the actuarial reporting, which indicates what the expected liability is. So that brings total financial liabilities of $1,287,000 for the year, resulting in net financial assets of $6,335,000. Our non-financial assets, so the largest of being, of course, tangible capital assets, is $18.7 million. So there were additions of about $1.2 million in 2019, predominantly relating to roadways, the Walker's line reconstruction, and then less the amortization of $814,000. Inventories, there's a small balance there with a slight increase, and then prepaid expenses, also a small balance. So that total non-financial assets is $18,798,000, which brings us to our total accumulated surplus of $25,133,000. Is there any questions on the statement of financial position before I move on?
Any questions so far? Okay, seeing none.
Okay, thank you. So continuing on to the statement of operations and accumulated surplus. So here you can see for presentation purposes, there's the budget column. So this is the Psab budget. And in note 15, what we illustrate is that we take the council approved budget and we do some adjustments for Psab, so public sector accounting, for things like capital and amortization. And that brings us to the budget that we have presented here. And then we compare that to the actual for the year ended December 31st, 2019, and the actual for the year ended December 31st, 2018. So most of my comments are going to relate to budget to actual. So in terms of property taxation, there was no rate increase in 2019, but there was an increase resulting from the MPAC assessment. So that's why there was an increase in the budget compared to the prior year. In terms of taxation from other governments, that includes the payment in lieu. So there was a slight increase there, and certainly an increase over budget. User charges, this relates to fees and permits, and there was a lot of comparability to 2018. The budget for revenue was just a bit higher, so not as many fees and permits as budgeted. Local improvement levies, so that's going to relate to the drains. Again, there was a relatively small amount budgeted, but the amount $428,000 was pretty comparable, obviously an increase, but comparable to the $337,000 in 2018. In terms of government transfers, there's the federal, provincial, and other municipal amounts. Within the provincial amount, there was new monies for the modernization fund. So that's resulting in an increase over budget. It was not anticipated at budget time. Investment income is significantly higher than budgeted, higher than last year as well, and that's due to that increasing cash balance. Penalties and interest on taxes are in line with budget and only slightly below the 2018 actual. Within other, there's some collections, recoveries, donations, etc. And then there's a small gain on disposal of capital assets. So that brings our total revenues for 2019 of $6,015,000. In terms of our expenses, so here we have them categorized by segment. So looking at general government first, there was a lower amount than budgeted. Some of the things in the budget that were higher included a higher amount budgeted for salaries, a higher amount budgeted for consulting and engineering, and a higher amount budgeted for materials and supplies. But you can see it is somewhat in line with the prior year. Fire and police protection, very comparable to budget and to prior year. Same with other protective services. Transportation services, again, we're seeing a significantly lower than budget. There were some amounts that I believe the budget was a bit higher than maybe necessary for the project. And then there were some projects that weren't done. There was some staff turnover in that area. But just as an example, there was $320,000 below budget on road maintenance for loose and hard top. So just as an example of something that was lower than budget. In terms of waterworks and sewer, the budget was higher, but the actual amount was comparable to the prior year. Garbage collection and disposal, very comparable across the board. And then agriculture is the next one I wanted to touch on. Again, the actual was in line with the budget, and this agriculture line relates to drainage. There was obviously more drainage work done in 2018. So that brings us to total expenses for the year of $4,249,000, which results in that large annual surplus for accounting purposes of $1,766,000. So is there any questions on the statement of operations before I continue through the statements?
I don't see anybody's hands going up, so you can continue.
Thank you. So statement of change in net financial assets. This is really just an accounting exercise showing things plus and minus to get to those net financial assets. Similarly, the statement of cash flows, I won't spend any time on it. It's a required disclosure, but it is just a mathematical accounting exercise. So then we turn to the notes to the financial statements. So note 1 is an outline of the significant accounting policies. There were no changes to the entity's accounting policies in the year, and there was no required changes either. So I will continue through. So I am now on page 12. I just wanted to point out some of the comments that are included in these policies. So for example, under environmental provisions and contaminated sites, there's a sentence here that's important for council to be aware of. So as at December 31st, 2019, there were no properties that the municipality was responsible to remedy, and as such, no liability has been accrued. So that's a good thing to know. The other thing I will point out at the end of note 1 is that there will be a change in the accounting standards relating to financial instruments. Due to COVID, they have postponed that implementation by a year. So it's still a couple of years out before it impacts us. So continuing on into the notes, the investment notes just outlining what is included in investments and the interest rates. Notes 3 and 4 are breaking down taxes receivable and accounts receivable. And I mentioned what some of those changes were year over year. Note 5 is the deferred revenue. And so this is where you can see that federal gas tax amount that I was mentioning that's resulting in the increase to deferred revenue. The other thing I'll briefly point out is that there was no change to the other building permit and road restoration revenue, $143,000. So that's been the same amount for a few years now. I think since 2015, it hasn't been used. Note 6 is outlining some of the details of the debt, as well as the tile drainage loans assumed by the individual. So those are not part of the township's debt. Note 7 is relating to the landfill closure and post-closure liability. So this is where we can see the details of the actuarial report, estimating how long until the landfill reaches capacity and the approximate estimated closure costs. So just some things I'll point out here. I know you're well aware Metcalfe expected to reach capacity in 2020, and I believe that was the case. And then Adelaide, as of the last actuarial report, the expected capacity date was 2024, and it's my understanding that it might be sooner than that. So there are the estimated closure costs, which do total $192,000 currently, and there is a reserve for this future expenditure, and currently the reserve is sitting at $250,000. So enough to cover that expected liability. Note 8 is tangible capital assets. This is where you can just see the additions, disposal, and amortization for the year. Note 9 outlines the details of the accumulated surplus, as well as the balances of the various reserves and reserve funds. I was just going to point out here that there are 2 new reserve funds this year. There's the building services one, as well as the modernization one. Sorry, I'm going through, I'm trying to highlight notes I think are significant, but obviously we can go back if there are any questions. Note 13 is contingent liabilities. So this is a relatively generic note. It's just indicating that there are legal actions that are pending against the township. The final outcome of claims cannot be determined at this time. However, management believes that the disposition of these matters will not materially exceed the amounts recorded. So we're not expecting a material amount of unrecorded or unaware liabilities. Note 15 outlines the budget, as I was mentioning, where you have the council approved budget and then the adjustments to get to the Psab budget. Note 16 is our new note across the board. It's our COVID note. So we are required to disclose it because it did happen subsequent to December 31st, 2019. This note is pretty generally worded. It's consistent with many of our other audit clients. It's just indicating that there are, of course, risks associated with a global pandemic. They're beyond the municipality's control, but there could be future financial impacts. And we go through the different descriptions of the segments, followed by the actual schedule of segment disclosure. So again, just a different way of breaking down the revenues and expenses of the township. So I know I went pretty quick. Is there any questions on the statements? Anything I can go back to?
Are there any questions at all from members of council? Councilor McKinnon?
Through you, Mayor Cordes, to Jennifer. Jennifer, on page 18, under the notes to the financial statements, under the surplus, the benefiting landowners, that 1,767,560, is that drainage?
Yes, that is drainage.
That's the drainage that we're
drainage,
holding.
And then 360,000 relates to the Highway 81 project financing.
So that's money that's still on our books that hasn't been billed to the benefiting landowners.
Right.
Perfect, thank you. And then under investments.
Yep. The
The
note or the balance sheet?
Just a question about whether or not we could invest in the Canadian markets where the principal is guaranteed, but the interest is not. If the stock market does well, you could do well on your interest, or it could be zero. Is the municipality eligible to take that risk when the principal is safe?
So many municipalities do invest their excess cash, and in your case, there's quite a lot of excess cash there. I'm not currently aware whether you have an investment policy that would dictate exactly what you can invest in. That would certainly be a step, but investing is very common with excess cash.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments? Councilor Brody or Deputy Mayor Hendricks?
Nope.
Being none. I do see on our agenda that you're wanting to go into closed session under section 239, 2I and J of the Municipal Act. Is that what we're wanting to do now?
That works for me.
Okay. Morgan, how does that work with us being on a webinar situation? I just wanted to throw that out there before we go into closed.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you to council, we'll have to essentially shut down the webinar and lock it so that we can go in closed. Those that are attendees as part of the webinar will have to disconnect, or we'll have to kick them out essentially, or remove them from the meeting. and then they'll have to reconnect in a reasonable amount of time. Jennifer, I'd ask you what you think you need, about 15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I'd say that anybody that's attending the webinar right now, try to reconnect back in about 15 minutes, or wait to see us get back on YouTube.
Okay. Excellent. So I guess we need that motion then to go into closed from Council McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Brody. All those in favor? And that's carried. So as Morgan just said, anybody that's supposed to be joining us on this call, try to use those links back at around